The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Have you ever stopped to consider that maybe the life you're living right now isn't actually yours? That maybe, somewhere along the way, you began trading pieces of your soul just to meet expectations that were never really yours to begin with? Welcome to Carl Jung's psychology. This is where we go beneath the surface, into the unconscious, into the shadows, into the truths you've always felt but maybe never had words for. If you've ever asked, is this all there is? You're in the right place, because this video is a mirror, a doorway, a reminder that the path back to yourself is not only possible, it's waiting for you. Let me ask you something, and not just in passing, but in a way that requires you to stop, to truly stop, and listen. When was the last time you paused long enough to actually feel your life? Not to analyze it, not to plan or manage it, but to feel it. To drop beneath the surface and ask, is this the life I truly want? Not the life that looks good in photos, not the one that checks the boxes, not the version that impresses others, but the one that speaks your name in the language of truth. You see, we've been taught to function, to be useful, to be impressive, to meet expectations so perfectly that we forget there was ever a version of ourselves that existed before we started performing. We get praised for being polite, rewarded for being efficient, celebrated for being successful, but no one ever asks, are you whole? Are you in alignment with your soul? Are you living or simply existing? And so we learn to abandon our inner compass. We trade our authenticity for approval. We silence our truth for safety. We become masters at adaptation and strangers to ourselves. Carl Jung once said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. But how do you look inside when everything outside is screaming for your attention? How do you hear your soul when the noise of the world never stops? You wake up and check your phone before you check in with yourself. You answer messages before you answer your own needs. You perform for a world that rarely sees the real you, and after a while, you forget that there was ever a real you at all. It's subtle. It doesn't break you overnight. It dissolves you. Quietly, slowly, invisibly. You begin to make decisions from fear rather than desire, from habit rather than intention, from obligation rather than alignment. You smile even when you feel numb. You say yes even when your body says no. You keep going even when something inside you is begging to stop. And here's the part that no one tells you. The longer you betray yourself, the easier it becomes to justify it. You tell yourself you're just being responsible. You convince yourself that this is just adulthood. You explain away the emptiness by calling it stress or pressure or just a phase. But deep down, you know. That quiet ache in your chest isn't random. That feeling of misalignment isn't wrong. That numbness you carry isn't weakness, it's your soul, trying to get your attention. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget, and the truth will always find a way to surface. You may silence it for a time. You may drown it in achievement, in relationships, in productivity. But one day, in a moment of stillness or heartbreak or unexpected clarity, it will rise. That whisper from within. This is not your truth. This is not your path. There is more to you than this. That voice is your original self, the one you left behind so you could survive. But survival is not the same as living, and the truth is, you cannot truly live until you choose to return to yourself. Not the self you were told to be, not the version others are comfortable with, but the self that existed before the world got to you, before the edits, before the masks, before the compromise, the self that still knows what freedom feels like. The one that remembers what it means to belong to yourself. Choosing yourself isn't easy. It may require letting go of what once defined you. It may disappoint people, It may unravel everything you've carefully built. But the cost of not choosing yourself is a slow death of the soul. And that's not just poetic, it's real. Carl Jung taught us that wholeness is not achieved by being perfect or by meeting expectations, but by integrating the truth of who you are. Even the messy parts, even the shadows, even the parts you're scared to admit you carry. Because your soul doesn't want perfection. It wants truth. It wants alignment. It wants to be chosen. And the question that could change your entire life is this: am I brave enough to choose myself, even when it costs me everything I thought I had to be? There's a truth we don't talk about enough. A quiet force that shapes your entire life. Not with violence, but with gentle pressure. Not with force, but with expectations. The world doesn't demand that you betray yourself. It simply nudges you to forget. From the moment you're born, you begin to absorb messages. Who you should be, what you should want, how to behave, what to pursue to be considered worthy. And so, you start to adjust. You learn when to speak and when to stay silent. You learn which parts of you are too much, which dreams are unrealistic, which emotions are inconvenient. You trade honesty for approval, curiosity for certainty, authenticity for belonging, not because you're weak, but because the world rewards the mask, the one that performs, the one that pleases, the one that fits in without making anyone uncomfortable. Carl Jung once said, "The persona is that which in reality we are not, but which ourselves and others think we are." And here's the danger. If you wear the mask long enough, you forget it was ever a mask. You look in the mirror and see the role, not the person. You feel the emptiness, but assume it's just part of life. You achieve, but it doesn't satisfy. You connect, but feel lonely. You smile, but something inside you stays silent. That silence, it's your soul knocking. But you don't know how to answer, because the world never taught you how. It only taught you to keep going, to stay busy, to stay agreeable, to stay productive. We live in a society that confuses performance with purpose. It celebrates the grind and shames stillness. It tells you success will bring peace, but never teaches you how to listen to the inner unrest. So you keep running, chasing goals that aren't yours, playing roles you didn't choose, smiling in photos that don't reflect how you truly feel. And all the while, something deep inside you whispers, "This isn't who I am." But the world drowns out that whisper with noise, with productivity, with deadlines, with pressure. And if that doesn't work, it tells you to numb it. Scroll, drink, shop, work harder. Just don't stop long enough to feel it. Because if you did, you might realize how far you've drifted. You're not exhausted because you're doing too much. You're exhausted because you've become disconnected from the part of you that gives life meaning. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And we do. We climb ladders built on other people's values. We suppress feelings that don't fit the narrative. We convince ourselves that if we just check one more box, get one more promotion, one more like, one more yes, then maybe finally we'll feel whole. But you can't build fulfillment on a foundation of self-abandonment. And when your soul is denied for too long, it doesn't disappear, it fights back. It shows up as anxiety that won't go away, as burnout that sleep can't fix, as anger that surprises you, as a numbness that settles into your bones. These aren't failures, they're messages. Signs that the life you're living isn't aligned with the truth inside you. The world may have shaped you, but it doesn't get to define you. You get to choose. Not just what you do, but who you are beneath the roles. And maybe the healing doesn't come from doing more, but from remembering what was lost, what you buried to belong, what you silenced to survive. Because beneath the layers, beneath the expectations and the noise, there is still a self untouched by all of it, a self that never needed fixing, a self that is waiting, not to be improved, but to be reclaimed. Coming home to yourself is not dramatic, it's quiet, it's slow, it's sacred, and it begins the moment you stop running from the truth that's always been there. You were never meant to be a product of the world. You were meant to be a reflection of your soul. There is a voice inside you. You may not hear it often, you may have learned to ignore it, but it has always been there. Quiet, patient, persistent. This voice doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't come with data, logic, or proof. It simply knows. You feel it as a tension in your chest, a flutter in your gut, a subtle discomfort when something's not right, even if you can't explain why. And most of your life, you've been trained to doubt it, to choose logic over feeling, to follow rules over instincts, to please others over honoring yourself. Because the voice of intuition, the voice of your soul, doesn't always align with what the world tells you is right. Sometimes it tells you to walk away when everyone says you should stay. Sometimes it asks you to speak up when silence feels safer. Sometimes it tells you to rest when the world demands you keep grinding. And when you don't listen, it doesn't punish you, it waits. Until the discomfort becomes louder, until the signs become too clear to ignore, until something in your life cracks open, and you realize you've been living by someone else's script. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And this is where most people live, in quiet disconnection from themselves. They follow paths that were never theirs. They chase dreams that were inherited, not chosen. They settle into relationships, careers, identities that look good from the outside, but feel hollow on the inside. And they wonder why they're anxious, why they feel numb, why joy feels fleeting and peace feels like a distant memory. It's not because something is wrong with them. It's because they've silenced the one voice that was trying to guide them home. The truth is, your soul speaks in whispers long before it screams. But the world doesn't teach you how to hear it. It teaches you how to obey, how to conform, how to survive. So your intuition becomes background noise, something you label as overthinking, or too sensitive, or just being emotional. But intuition isn't emotional noise. It's ancient intelligence. It's the language of your unconscious, the only part of you that sees beneath the surface of things. It knows when something is off long before your mind catches up. It knows what feels real even if it doesn't make sense. And every time you ignore it, you move further from yourself. You say yes when you meant no. You stay when your body is begging you to leave. You smile when your soul is aching. You make choices from fear of disappointing, of failing, of being alone, rather than from alignment. But here's the truth, most people are afraid to admit. Intuition never lies. It may inconvenience you. It may challenge everything you've built. It may ask you to let go of what you once loved. But it never lies. It is the purest compass you will ever have. Not perfect, but honest. And honest is everything. Carl Jung believed that your unconscious isn't just a storage room of memories. It's a sacred guide, trying to restore balance between the life you perform and the truth you carry inside. And that inner voice, that's your bridge to it. So why do we resist it? Because listening means change, and change means risk. Risk of loss, risk of rejection, risk of uncertainty. But do you know what's riskier than change? Staying disconnected, staying in the job, the relationship, the lifestyle that drains your spirit. Waking up every day knowing you're performing instead of living. That is the slowest form of self-abandonment, and it's the most painful one, because it doesn't kill you, it just keeps you numb. Until one day, something inside you snaps. You can't pretend anymore. You can't rationalize your way through the ache. and you begin to ask the question you've avoided for years. What if I started listening? What if you gave yourself permission to trust what you feel, even when you can't explain it? To honor your inner no without guilt? To follow your yes without needing permission? What if you let your soul lead, not your fear? You'd lose some things, maybe even people. But what you'd gain would be something no one else could give you, yourself. That's the voice you silenced. That's the part of you waiting to come alive again. Not the version of you that pleases, performs, or pretends, but the version that breathes deeply, that creates without apology, that rests without shame, that speaks with clarity because it finally trusts itself. When you reclaim that voice, life begins to shift. Not all at once, but steadily. You begin to notice when something feels off and trust yourself enough to act. You say no faster. You say yes with more joy. You walk away with peace instead of fear. And you no longer ask for validation because you finally believe in your own knowing. Jung believed the soul always tries to correct what the ego has distorted. And the voice of your intuition, that subtle, sacred knowing, is your soul's way of leading you back to what is real. So stop waiting for the outside world to give you permission. You already have the one thing you need, the voice within. Now's the time to listen. Because that voice, the one you've silenced, isn't just a whisper anymore. It's the sound of your real life trying to begin. What happens when you don't choose yourself? Not all at once, not in some dramatic implosion, but slowly. So slowly, you don't even notice it. At first, it looks like fatigue. You say, I'm just tired, and keep pushing through. More caffeine, more meetings, more smiling. You keep showing up, but a little less of you arrives each time. Then it turns into a quiet unease. You begin to feel disconnected, even when surrounded by people. You laugh, but it doesn't land. You achieve, but it doesn't satisfy. Something always feels slightly off, but you can't quite name it. That's the early cost of not choosing yourself. You begin to vanish in plain sight. You still function. You still perform. You still say all the right things. But underneath it all, a piece of you is quietly grieving. Grieving the version of yourself you buried to be accepted, to be safe, to belong. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And maybe that's why we don't. Because choosing yourself, truly choosing yourself, requires facing all the parts you've suppressed, the dreams you gave up on, the boundaries you never held, the truths you were too afraid to say out loud, so you avoid it. You keep adjusting, keep performing, keep chasing goals that look impressive but feel empty. And slowly, the disconnection grows roots. You stop trusting your own instincts. You defer to others. You second-guess every decision. You become an expert at silencing yourself before anyone else has the chance to. Your maybe becomes yes. Your no becomes of course. Your I'm not okay becomes I'm fine. Until eventually you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. Not because you've changed, but because you've disappeared. This is the cost of not choosing yourself, and it's not loud, it's not explosive, it's subtle, it's silent, but it's devastating. You begin to live in fragments. Your life becomes something you manage, not something you inhabit. You go through the motions, checking boxes on someone else's checklist. And the worst part? You get so good at it, you start convincing yourself this is what life is supposed to feel like. But deep down, there's a knowing, a quiet ache that never really leaves. It shows up in the spaces between your obligations, in the silence after the noise dies down, in the solitude when no one else is watching. It whispers, "This isn't who you are. This isn't what you came here to do. This isn't the life your soul wanted." Jung believed that our unconscious never stops trying to wake us up, but the longer we ignore it, the more it pushes back. First with whispers, then with fatigue, then with burnout, then with heartbreak, breakdown, collapse. Whatever it takes to get your attention, because your soul refuses to be silenced forever. And here's the brutal truth. You can succeed without choosing yourself. You can be admired. You can be productive. You can be praised for how much you give, how hard you work, how selfless you are. But deep down, you'll know it's a performance. And eventually, the applause won't be enough. You'll start to feel resentful toward the people you gave too much to, toward the systems that demanded your compliance, toward yourself for not speaking up sooner, and maybe, worst of all, you'll feel regret. Not because you failed, but because you never gave yourself a chance to really begin. Because choosing yourself isn't about being selfish, it's about being sovereign. It's about coming home to your own authority. It's about reclaiming your right to feel, to want, to exist on your own terms. But when you don't choose yourself, life chooses for you. People choose for you. Systems choose for you. Fear chooses for you. And you end up living a life that doesn't feel like yours. One day, you wake up successful and miserable, loved but unseen, secure and deeply unfulfilled. That's the cost, and it's not worth it. Because the truth is, the people who truly love you don't want the version of you that performs. They want the one who breathes, the one who feels, the one who says, "This is me," and means it. You deserve a life that reflects your soul, not one that constantly betrays it. So let me ask you, what have you been saying yes to that your body screams no at? What boundaries have you failed to hold because you feared being alone? What parts of yourself have you labeled too much, when in reality they were the truest parts of you? These are the moments that call for radical honesty, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because until you choose yourself, you will keep handing over your power to people, places, and roles that were never meant to hold it. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." The world has conditioned you to look outward for meaning, for worth, for belonging, for validation. But everything you've been searching for begins the moment you look inward and say, "I matter, I'm here, I choose me." And when you do, something shifts. The numbness begins to lift. The resentment begins to fade. The ache begins to soften. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop performing, you start living. You stop pleasing, you start honoring. You stop pretending, you start becoming. And in that sacred return to self, you find the only kind of peace that lasts. The kind that comes from no longer abandoning who you are. Letting go is one of the hardest things we ever do. Not because we don't want to be free, but because we've built our lives around things we secretly know are no longer meant for us. A relationship that no longer nurtures you. A career that once made sense, but now drains your soul. An identity you've outgrown, yet still cling to because it feels safer than starting over. Carl Jung once said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." And that's the paradox of transformation. To become who you truly are, you must first accept who you've been, and then have the courage to let it go. But here's what no one tells you. Letting go isn't just a decision, it's a mourning. You're not just walking away from a job, or a person, or a dream. You're grieving the version of you who believed that thing was your forever. You're saying goodbye to the comfort of certainty, to the illusion of control, to the stories you've carried for years about what your life was supposed to look like. And that grief is real, even if the relationship was toxic, even if the career was suffocating, even if the life you're walking away from was never truly yours. Because when you let go, you're not just releasing the old, you're stepping into the unknown. And the unknown is terrifying. Your ego hates it. Your fear resists it. Your nervous system fights it, because you don't yet know what comes next. You don't have guarantees. You don't have a clear roadmap. All you have is your truth, and that has to be enough. But what if it is? What if your truth, raw, unfiltered, inconvenient, is the only thing that can lead you home? What if the discomfort of letting go is the price of liberation? We tend to hold on far too long, not because we're weak, but because we're loyal to people, to dreams, to past versions of ourselves who didn't know better. We stay in places we've outgrown because we don't want to seem ungrateful, because we're afraid of hurting others, because we confuse endurance with integrity. But what if holding on is hurting you more than anyone else? What if the kindest thing you could do for yourself and for everyone involved is to surrender, to stop forcing what no longer flows, to stop performing what no longer fits, to stop pretending you're okay when your soul is screaming for something more? Because here's the deeper truth. You cannot fully choose yourself until you're willing to let go of everything that is not aligned with who you are becoming. Letting go is not giving up, it's growing up. It's realizing that freedom costs security, that peace costs familiarity, that authenticity costs approval, but what you gain in return is priceless. You gain your breath back, your clarity, your energy, your voice, your sense of self. You begin to feel like yourself again. Not the version of you that pleases everyone, but the one who feels aligned, anchored, alive. Jung believed the journey to individuation requires a descent into the unknown, a letting go of the masks, roles, and projections we've unconsciously adopted. He called it the path of integration, facing your shadow, embracing the full spectrum of who you are, and reclaiming the parts you've disowned. And none of that is possible while you're clinging to a version of life that no longer reflects your truth. So what are you still holding on to? What relationship, belief, or identity are you gripping tightly because you're afraid of what might happen if you loosen your grasp? What would it feel like to finally set it down, to say, this no longer fits who I am, and that's okay? To trust that letting go isn't the end of the story, but the beginning of the one you were meant to live. Because here's the miracle. Once you release what is false, what is true begins to find you. The right people, the aligned opportunities, the path that was always yours, hidden behind everything you were afraid to release. This is the real work. Not building a perfect life, but releasing everything that blocks you from living a true one. So take a deep breath. Feel the weight of what you've been carrying, and ask yourself gently, is this mine to hold? And if the answer is no, let it go, not all at once, not perfectly, but honestly. Because every time you release what no longer serves you, you create more space for what your soul has been asking for all along: freedom, peace, and the courage to become who you were always meant to be. So you've let go. You've walked away from the things that no longer serve you. You've loosened your grip on the identities, the expectations, the illusions. Now comes the part no one prepares you for, the stillness, the space between what was and what's yet to come. It's quiet here, unfamiliar, unsettling. You've spent years wrapped in noise, performing, pleasing, proving, and now, with all that stripped away, you're left with something strange and sacred, yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And this, right now, is your invitation to begin that communication, not with the world, but with the self you've abandoned, avoided, or simply forgotten. This is the return, not to the person others expected you to be, not to some idealized version of yourself, but to the one that's been buried beneath the noise all along, the one who knows, who feels, who doesn't need to explain. Wholeness isn't found in achievement, it's found in alignment, and that journey, It begins right here, right now, in the space where nothing feels certain, and yet, something in you knows you're on the right path. You might not feel ready, you might not even know where to start, but hear this. You don't need a perfect plan, you need only one thing, a willingness to remember. Because the truth is, you've always known. Beneath the roles, beneath the conditioning, beneath the coping strategies and survival modes, there's been a quiet, steady knowing. The voice that said, "This isn't who I am." The ache that whispered, "There's more." The pull towards something deeper, truer, real. You don't need to earn your way back to yourself. You don't need to fix, prove, or strive. You need to pause. You need to listen. And then you begin to return. At first, it's subtle. You honor what feels good in your body. You say no when you mean it. You stop apologizing for your needs. You slow down. You notice. You feel. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are by integrating everything you've rejected, feared, or hidden. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming who you were before the world told you who to be. That includes the parts you've deemed too much, the ones you've silenced to stay safe, the dreams you shelved for later, the rage you buried, the grief you ignored. All of it is part of you, and all of it is welcome. Wholeness means nothing is exiled. And yes, the road back can feel confusing. You might wonder, am I doing it right? Is this working? Why does it still feel hard? But that's not a sign you're lost. It's a sign you're healing. Because healing isn't linear. It's layered. It's cyclical. It asks you to return again and again to the places where you once abandoned yourself and choose differently. It asks you to hold yourself with compassion instead of criticism, to stay when it's uncomfortable, to trust your timing. And slowly you begin to feel something shift. You stop performing for approval. You start living from truth. You stop running from silence. You start craving it. You stop chasing connection. You start becoming magnetic to those who truly see you. That's not ego, that's energy. The more you align with your soul, the more your life begins to reflect that alignment. This is what Jung meant by synchronicity. When the inner and outer world begin to move in harmony, you meet the right people, you receive the right message at the right time, doors open, clarity returns, not because you forced it, but because you finally got out of your own way. This is the power of the return. You're no longer hustling for a life that looks good. You're creating a life that feels good. You're no longer seeking wholeness in things, roles, or relationships. You're discovering it within. And here's the part that's often missed. Wholeness doesn't mean nothing hurts. It doesn't mean you never doubt, never fear, never stumble. It means you no longer abandon yourself when you do. You don't shrink. You don't betray your truth to avoid discomfort. You don't pretend. You stay. You breathe. You begin again. Because now, you know, you are not your fear. You are not your wounds. You are not your past. You are the one who holds it all with grace, with awareness, with love. You are the home you've been searching for. So if you find yourself in the in-between, if the old no longer fits and the new hasn't fully arrived, you're not lost. You're arriving, not at a destination, but at your essence. And from this place, everything changes. When you choose yourself, not just in grand gestures, but in quiet, consistent ways, something begins to shift. At first, it's subtle, almost imperceptible. You start saying no to things that used to drain you. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You find yourself walking away, not in anger, but in peace. And then, it deepens. The conversations you tolerate begin to change. The environments that once felt familiar now feel too small. You stop bending to fit into spaces that were never built for you. And slowly, you start building your own. This is not magic, it's resonance. When you live in alignment, your life recalibrates. Not overnight, but undeniably. Carl Jung described this as synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that signal you are no longer moving against yourself. You meet people who feel like soul family. Opportunities arise without force. Doors close and you no longer chase them, because you trust what's meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself. You begin to notice that you are no longer exhausted by things that once consumed you. You're no longer searching for something to fill a space within, because the space has been filled by you, by your own presence, by your truth, by your deep-rooted commitment to live from the inside out. You realize you are not too much. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply living out of alignment with your essence. And now that you've chosen yourself, you're no longer at war within. This inner peace doesn't make life perfect, but it makes it profoundly livable. You begin to trust the pauses. You stop resisting the seasons. You find meaning in the mess, beauty in the becoming, clarity in the quiet. You begin to feel deeply connected, not just to others, but to life itself. Because now, you're not performing it. You're participating in it, consciously, intentionally, lovingly. Relationships begin to reflect your truth. The ones that were built on your silence start to fade. The ones that honor your voice begin to flourish. You stop begging for love, you embody it. This is the shift, the quiet revolution, the moment your life begins to move with you, not against you, and you realize choosing yourself was never selfish. It was sacred. It wasn't about turning your back on others. It was about turning toward yourself, so you could finally offer the world something real. When you choose yourself, you raise your standard for love, for energy, for joy, for peace. You stop settling for proximity and start choosing connection. You stop seeking comfort and start honoring truth. And in doing so, you inspire others to do the same. Not by preaching, not by proving, just by being. Because authenticity is contagious. And when you live in yours, you give others silent permission to return to theirs. This is how the world changes. Not through noise, not through force, but through presence. Through people who have the courage to say, "This is who I am, and I will no longer abandon myself to be loved." When you choose yourself, you don't just reclaim your life. You redefine what it means to be alive. And that changes everything. Choosing yourself isn't just a one-time decision. It's not some dramatic turning point where everything changes at once. No, it's quieter than that. It's daily, subtle, sacred. It lives in the small moments, in the breath before you say yes when your whole body wants to say no, in the gentle awareness that says, "This isn't right for me," even if it once was. Carl Jung once said, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." And the truth is, you're choosing every day, with your words, your time, your attention, your silence. The question is, are those choices aligned with your truth or with your fear? There will be days when you forget, when old habits come back, when people try to pull you into versions of yourself you've outgrown. That's okay, that's part of it. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being conscious. It's about catching yourself in the moment and gently coming back. Back to your center, back to your body, back to your knowing. Every time you do that, you build trust with yourself. And over time, that trust becomes unshakable. You begin to move differently, not faster, but with more intention. Not louder, but with more clarity. You stop asking for permission. You start listening inward. You stop performing. You start aligning. This isn't always easy. Sometimes choosing yourself means disappointing others. Sometimes it means letting go of comfort, walking into the unknown, and holding space for your own complexity. But the reward is real. You stop chasing love because you've become it. You stop seeking validation because you now know your worth. You stop fearing solitude because you finally come home to yourself. This is integration, not a destination, but a way of being. It means remembering who you are again and again, especially when life tries to make you forget. It means choosing truth, even when it shakes your voice. Choosing rest, even when hustle calls your name. Choosing boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. And most of all, choosing presence. Not perfection, not control, just this moment, right here. Fully felt, fully lived, fully yours. That's how you change your life. That's how you rewrite your story. Not by deleting the past, but by choosing something different today. Carl Jung believed that real healing comes when we embrace the totality of who we are. And when you live in that kind of truth, you don't just transform your life. You become a light for others too. Not by trying, not by teaching, just by being. So if no one's told you lately, you're doing it right. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're remembering. And every time you choose yourself, you make that memory stronger. You return home. And that's the most powerful journey you'll ever take. You've walked with me through a journey. From the moment you asked yourself the hard questions, to the courage it took to face what you've been avoiding, to the quiet miracle of choosing yourself. This isn't the end. It never was meant to be. Because healing isn't linear, and truth isn't a destination. It's a practice, a returning, a remembering. So if today you feel strong, keep going. If today you feel broken, you are still whole. If today you feel lost, know this, you are not alone. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege is yours, right now. Every breath you take is a chance to begin again. Every decision is an opportunity to align. Every boundary is a declaration, I matter. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to be honest with yourself. Because the most powerful transformation doesn't come from fixing who you are. It comes from embracing who you've always been. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be real, to be alive, to be free. And the world doesn't need another version of someone else. It needs you, in your fullness, your depth, your quiet fire. So take this with you. The next time you're tempted to shrink, remember who you are. The next time you feel the urge to please, pause and return to your truth. The next time fear whispers, "You're not enough," speak louder, "I am already whole." Let this be your anchor. Let this be your revolution. Let this be your homecoming. Because in the end, you were never really lost. You were only ever waiting for your own permission to come home. And now, you've arrived. If this message found you at the right time, don't let it stop here. Share it. Let it echo in someone else's soul. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because this space exists for one purpose, to help you remember your truth again and again. And let me know in the comments, what did this message awaken in you? What part of your truth are you ready to choose today? Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. But most of all, thank you for choosing you. Until next time, stay true, stay brave, and never forget, you are the home you've been seeking.